Hi, good morning, everyone. We are Group 5, and we will be presenting a philosophy idea called contractualism. Now, in order for us to really understand this well, we are going to be breaking down this presentation into digestible segments. We're going to start off by knowing its origin, looking at the definition, its application in the real world setting, its strengths and weaknesses. We're also going to compare this with other contrasting philosophy ideas. And finally, we are going to use some examples for us to be able to grasp its concept really, really well, hopefully. Now, contractualism wasn't always called this way. Back in the day, during the times of some philosophers who are the key thinkers of this concept, namely Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, they call this social contract. They propose that societies are based on an implicit or explicit agreement among individuals to create rules and institutions that ensure order, justice, and mutual benefit. Now, later on, this term was developed and modernized, and that's how it became contractualism. But basically, it has the same definition. Now, there are five of us in this group, and I will be taking part into defining this concept. Now, some of you may notice a familiar word in this term, which is the word contract. Now, I think most of us know what a contract is. Technically, a contract is, for those of you who may not know what a contract is, it's a legally binding agreement between two or more parties that creates obligations for each party. The most common form of contract that I think most of us are familiar of will be an employment contract. If you're a person who's looking for a job, saw a job ad somewhere, applied for it, got an invite for an interview, or go through the hiring process, eventually get hired, what's more likely going to happen next is that the HR department of that company will draft a contract that sets out all the provisions that have something to do with your employment. It may contain rules, it may contain details about your employment, like your salary and stuff like that, right? That tool creates an obligation between two parties, which is the company and yourself as an employee. And if you agree on what's on that document, that contract, then you will start with your employment. Now, let's define it, right? According to the literature, contractualism is grounded in principles that no one could reasonably reject, focusing on fairness and mutual agreement to guide moral decisions. Now, that definition is relatively short, but to me, that's kind of a little vague. So, let's use an analogy, okay? Imagine you are playing a game with your friends, and you all need to agree on the rules before you start because, of course, no one would like to join a game if they feel that the rules are unfair. So the rules have to be fair. So no one feels left out or thinks the game is unfair. You want everyone to agree on the rules because that's how you make sure the game is fun for everyone, not just one person. So contractualism is like that, but for life. It's about thinking of rules or decisions that everyone could agree are fair and wouldn't hurt others in a way that's not okay. It's a way of asking, would I think this is fair if I were in someone else's shoes? If your answer is yes to that question, then it's probably a good rule or decision. Okay, so what are the keywords in the definition of the term contractualism? Keywords are agreement, fairness, order, justice, mutual benefit. So if you remember these five words or five terms, you will be able to grasp the concept of the philosophy idea contractualism. All right, so let's move on to the next segment.
Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes' contribution to contractualism includes the concept of state of nature, the necessity of social contract, and the idea that political authority is grounded in mutual consent. State of nature. He describes it as the hypothetical condition in which there is no government, laws, or authority. It's where people act without rules or responsibility to their community. In this state, individuals are naturally equal in their ability to harm one another and are driven by self preservation and self interest. However, this equality and unrestrained freedom lead to constant fear, competition, and a war of all against all. At para hindi umabot sa ganon, Hobbes argues that rational individuals would agree to form a social contract. Social contract. This agreement allowed people to create a society and rules, surrendering certain freedoms to a sovereign authority in exchange for security and order. It holds that people are motivated to accept morality because they are vulnerable to others and can benefit from cooperation. This mutual agreement serves as the basis for society and political organization. Basically, it is the idea that people agree to social norms to maintain order, or in other words, it indicates that the view of morality is based on agreement. Mutual consent is collective and irrevocable. That's why breaking the contract would return to society to the anarchy of the state of nature. Jean Rawls. Jean Rawls reinterpreted the social contract in his work A Theory of Justice in 1971 by presenting a modern and egalitarian version of the idea. Unlike others who focus on the origins of government or authority, Rawls' social contract is designed to determine fair principles of justice that can govern a well-ordered society. Justice as fairness. Rawls' primary concern is distributive justice, like how should society's benefits and burdens be distributed? How can we arrange things so that everyone gets a fair share? Rawls believes that there is a procedure for generating ethical principles that guarantees they will be fair as possible. That procedure is the one that would be followed in drawing up the ideal social contract. The principles of justice for the basic structure of society are the principles that free and rational persons would accept in an initial situation of equality as defining the fundamental terms of their association. In an ideal contract making situation, the parties to the contract meets as equals. So it means no one has any information that the others lack, because if someone had privileged information, he could use it to skew the contract in his favor. To ensure that none of the parties can take unfair advantage of others, Rawls has us imagine that the parties in the original position conduct their negotiations behind the veil of ignorance. Rawls introduced the concept of original position as a hypothetical scenario in which individuals design the principles of justice for society. And to ensure fairness, individuals operate behind the veil of ignorance, meaning there are certain things that they do not know about themselves, like they do not know their race, abilities, gender, and social status. This equality guarantees impartiality because the parties do not know what group they belong to, so they should not agree to principles that discriminate against a particular group. And because they do not know their specific wants and needs, The principles draw up should only be concerned with primary goods. So, the goods that all parties should want regardless of their particular situation. So, for Rawls, we also follow the principles that it would be rational for everyone to choose. If they had to choose those principles without knowing anything about themselves or their circumstances. Because each person knows that they could end up being anyone. Each must have concern for all. Rawls uses self-interest behind the veil of ignorance to represent a commitment to justice and construed as fairness to all. He transformed the social contract from a focused political authority to a focus on designing just principles for social cooperation in pluralistic and democratic societies.
The core principle of contractualism is that an action, a principle, or a decision should not be reasonably rejected by anyone. However, it still emphasizes fairness to all the parties who are involved. Therefore, an action is considered as wrong if you cannot justify why you chose that kind of action, why did you choose that kind of decision. And additionally, you must take note that in contractualism, it doesn't mean that you must choose what is the less undesirable. You must consider how can you justify that kind of action to those parties who are involved with your decision, especially to those people who will be affected by the decision that you have made.
Okay, so let's move on to the strengths and weaknesses of contractualism as well as the critics of this. So contractualism has a lot of strengths, including the ability to balance interests and protect individual rights. But it has also some weaknesses, okay? So I will tackle all of those. The first one is the Rawls approach emphasizes fairness and social cooperation through original position. So original position meaning that citizens comes to an agreement on which principles of justice they will use. So the strength of this is it focuses on justice as fairness, and it aims to provide equitable conditions for all individuals. So it has potential reducing social injustices. But in contrast, as Hobbes said, the social contract theory posits an agreement among individuals to form a society for self-preservation and safety. So the strength of this is necessity of authority to maintain order, and as well as but however, the critics argue that it can justify authoritarianism, okay, and it has potential to abuse, and as well it will limit individual freedoms. So it also involves individuals in state of nature agreeing to surrender certain freedoms to sovereign authority in exchange for protection and societal order. Okay, the number one example here is the citizens or agree to abide by laws in exchange for security and public services. So for example, our country is democratic country wherein citizens vote for the president, the vice president, or the authority. So we vote for our security and for them to serve us. And number two is in business or corporate. So they may adopt a form of contractualism by outlining ethical agreements with stakeholders such as employees, customers, etc. So contracts may specify the rights and responsibilities of each party. So it aims to maintain trust and cooperation. This one is one of the strengths of contractualism. Move on to the critics of contractualism. Number one is utilitarianism. Utilitarians critics roles for potentially neglecting the overall happiness or overall welfare in favor for individual rights, agreements, or even principle of justice. So they argue that moral and political decisions should maximize the greatest good for greatest number, not just fairness or social contracts. For example of this is the public health crisis of the Philippines during COVID-19. So utilitarians advocate for policies that sacrifice individual rights, such as lockdowns, for greater good, challenging roles, prioritizations of individual fairness. Number two is the feminism. Contractualism often ignores inequalities and roles of relationships. So Carol Pateman argues social contract theories are inherently patriarchal and fail to address the exploitation of women. For example, unpaid domestic labor or reproductive rights, it overlooked in contractualism, which focuses on public justice rather than private inequalities.
So for comparison, I will give a short description and a scenario so that we can understand more clearly the theories. So for the contractualism, an action is wrong if it violates everyone would agree on. Basically, if you decide, you should consider all the individuals who are involved. So I will make a scenario. So the scenario is you find a wallet full of cash on the street. So if we put the contractualism on that scenario, the response would be return the wallet to the owner because everyone would agree that keeping someone else's belongings is unfair and unreasonable. So that's the contractualism. We'll move on to the utilitarianism. The utilitarianism is do whatever makes the most people happy, even if someone or some are happy. So basically, majority wins. So if we put that exact scenario, the utilitarianism, the response would be keep the wallet if the money could help many people, like donating to the charity, as it maximizes happiness. Even the owner lose their wallet. So that's the utilitarianism. So moving on to the deontology, always follow moral rules no matter the result is. So basically, duties, universal law, etc. So if we put that exact scenario that you find a wallet full of cash on the street, the response of the deontology is return the wallet because stealing or keeping what isn't yours is always wrong regardless the outcome is. So, we can get it already. So, the last one is virtue ethics. So, be a good person and do what a kind, honest, or fair person would do. So, basically, personal values. Again, if we put that exact scenario, the response, if we the response of the virtue ethics is return the wallet because an honest and kind person would do so, showing respect and care for others. So that's all for the comparison.
Okay. For example, in a hospital, there is a lack of resources, and there is two patients that needed a ventilator. The first patient is in a critical condition, and the second patient is he is more likely to survive in a situation, and there's only one ventilator left. If we're going to choose between those two patients using contractualism, we're most probably going to choose the more likely to survive because we are maximizing the likelihood of saving a life rather than choosing a patient who most probably not survive in a situation. We are maximizing the resources, the use of the resources, and if whether we could save a life of a person. That is the justification of the action that we have made, and it cannot be reasonably rejected by the other party. Remember, even though that we are choosing fairness, we are considering fairness, there is still a possibility that we will choose something that is not that is less we are not choosing something that is less undesirable. However, we are choosing something that is fair and cannot be rejected by anyone, that we can justify why we choose that action. So in the justification of what we have done, we are choosing whether we could save a life of a person, or could we choose someone who is not we are not sure, or there is a possibility that that patient cannot survive if we gave them the ventilator. So that is the first example. So for the second example is that there is a company who is facing a financial crisis, and that company needs to let go of some of their employees to survive. Now the dilemma here is that how should the company decide which employee to let go? So if we're going to choose among those employees using contractualism, we must consider, are those employees relying their financial income from the company itself, or do they have alternative incomes, or do they have enough savings to survive? So let's say that the company is some of them have businesses, and some of them are part-timers, and some of the employees are nearly in their or close to their retirement age or retirement, and the rest of the employees are solely relying their income to the company. So if we're going to choose using contractualism, we are considering fairness, and of course something that no one could reasonably reject. Therefore, the company will choose those people who have alternative incomes and those who are near to their retirement age, because they already have their savings, those who are close to their retirement, and those who have alternative incomes does not muchly affected of the companies if they have been let go of the company. And all those employees who are solely relying their income from the company will much better stay, because of the struggle of the financial crisis. And therefore it is how we justify why are we choosing those people, why are we letting those employees go, and why have we chosen them. And that's how you use contractualism. You must justify, you must ensure that there is a fairness among your choice, among all the parties that are involved, especially to those who are impacted. And it is actually not choosing what is the undesirable, what is the less undesirable. It is choosing something that you can justify, that you chose this action because you can justify that this is fair, and this is my reason of choosing it, and this is something that no one could reasonably reject.